If you were around in the 1980s, there's a very good chance you may have heard about the band The Dead Kennedys. Even if you weren't a fan of their music or could even identify it, it was hard to ignore their presence in the news and in the courtrooms. Back then, the music industry was under attack by a group of concerned political housewives in Washington known as the Parents Music Resource Center, or the PMRC, who were looking to label music that they deemed as obscene. The PMRC was run by Tipper Gore, the wife of future Vice President Al Gore, and their focus was on music that was either sexually explicit, violent, demonic, or allegedly glorified the use of such dangerous drugs as marijuana. And in doing so, they went after artists like the Dead Kennedys, who would be forced into the fight of their lives to protect their First Amendment rights. In 1985, Dead Kennedys lead singer Jello Biafra was arrested and prosecuted for including a piece of artwork from H.R. Geiger in the sleeve of the album Frankenchrist, accusing Biafra of distributing harmful matter. Jello Biafra eventually won that case, but the expense of defending himself took a heavy financial toll on him, the band, and eventually led to the dissolution of the Dead Kennedys. What people didn't realize at the time, other than their fans, was that the Dead Kennedys, and in particular Jello Biafra, were releasing some of the most politically astute and poignant songs of their generation. Their music was filled with satire, social commentary, and a caustic rebuke of the hypocrisies in politics and in corporate America. This was powerful stuff played by a band that could actually play their instruments, sung by a guy who continues to be one of the most relentless and politically scathing critics of the hypocrisies of this country. Apart from Frank Zappa himself, he is maybe one of the most important advocates of free speech in the history of recorded music, period. He's run for political office on several occasions, including an unsuccessful run for mayor of San Francisco in 1979. He was also a Green Party candidate for the presidency in 2000. Jello Biafra has a new album out with his band, the Guantanamo School of Medicine. It's entitled Tea Party Revenge Porn, and if you love the Dead Kennedys, trust me, you will love this album too. I've been wanting to talk to Jello Biafra for a damn long time, and I finally got a chance to do it, and man, did he have a lot to say. This is my conversation with Jello on Baxi's Musical Podcast.
What is it? What is it?
It's Baxi's Musical Podcast.
I've actually been wanting to speak to you for about 30 years, and it kind of goes back to when I was in college. I think it was 1988, 89. You spoke at Marquette University, where I went to where I went to school, and I was there that night. And I remember, I don't remember if this was before or after you released the High Priest of Harmful Matter album, but it was around that time. And
that makes sense.
And I thought it was absolutely fascinating. One, because I couldn't believe that Marquette knew what they were getting when they agreed to have you, and then secondly, the content of the night was mind blowing. And that was a year that we had Allen Ginsberg and William S. Burroughs, and of the three presentations that I remember yours the most. And I don't know if if that says more about you or if that says more about me. But that was the one that was just a total, like a transformative type of thing. I had never seen anybody present material with such clarity and humor and seriousness that you did. It was a remarkable night.
I probably wasn't even using notes yet either, just because I had so much stored up in my head about the dirty behind-the-scenes dealings of Tipper Gore and her co-founder of the Parents Music Resource Center, the anti-music hate group, and co-founder, of course, was Susan Baker, who was the wife of, Secretary of State / gangster James Baker, who was in power then and still does dirty stuff around the world.
Of course.
I mean, he and Daddy Bush never retired. Apparently, their crash pad of choice for years, they did a lot of business in the Middle East, was the Bin Laden family compound.
It does seem a lot like politics and government, and this kind of thing is always been somewhat of a family business.
Well, also, I mean, Baker was so skilled at bullying and gangster tactics and using, bludgeoning somebody when all you had to do was just stick a pin in their finger or something. That was who Daddy Bush and crew picked to rescue their son's presidential thing in Florida in 2000.
Right.
Baker played a major role in strong-arming and organizing and probably helping with that Brooks Brothers riot, as they call it now, where a bunch of repug operatives, some of whom hold very powerful jobs now, stormed into where they were counting the ballots in Dade County and kind of wrecked the place. I am greatly relieved, at least so far, that kind of stuff didn't erupt all over the country. I mean, they did try in Maricopa County, Phoenix, Arizona, and in Pennsylvania. They knew enough in advance, at least, to line the place outside with cops to keep these people out. And it wasn't Brooks Brothers. It was MAGA hat Nazis and all, some of whom had automatic weapons,
right.
Of course. Nothing like open carry laws to make you feel safer. And the seizure of the Capitol building by those militia goons in Michigan, which was partly financed by the DeVos family, that was a dry run. And the monster trucks roaring into Portland, all 150 of them, and ramming protesters and, firing at them with paintball guns and bear spray, no less, not just pepper spray like they called it on the news. This is for bears. And, it's not, you're not supposed to do that to people because they might not come back the same way. And another monster truck rally detoured after they, flexed their muscle rolling down Main Street in a Virginia town, and early voting had started. So they went to the big county polling place and started harassing the people in line trying to vote. They didn't hit anybody, but some of them were armed, and they were heckling everybody in a big way, to the point where even the county elections commissioner, whoever he was who was in charge of the thing that day, had to come out and help escort people in one by one just so they could exercise their right to vote. That's what I was worried about all over the country, which you might have had more of, except that, the people around Clown Prince W, they were pros. They were experienced mobsters. The Bushes are a crime family, as are the Trumps and the Kushners when you look back at them and stuff. The Bush people went behind the scenes, and they monkeyed with the Florida ballot system with the Secretary of State Catherine Harris, to the point where all kinds of people who just happened to be attempting to vote while black were labeled convicted felons on the voter rolls and not allowed to vote, even though some of them, 2000 election, look, you were convicted of a felony in 2008. You can't vote. Greg Palast exposed that in his book, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, which he then made of a movie using the same title before the 2016 election, predicting exactly what actually happened. Where were all the black people for Hillary in these states she barely lost and we thought she was going to win? Oh, they were there. They voted by mail or in person. They just had their ballots tossed and nobody told them. And Palast estimated afterwards between 1.5 and 7 million ballots nationwide were tossed because of you want the real vote fraud, here you go, interstate cross-check program run by that right-wing extremist wunderkind from Kansas by the name of Chris Kobach, same guy who wrote the Show Me Your Papers law in Arizona, where they were arresting everybody for driving while brown until the courts threw it out. But anyway, interstate cross-check program, 29 states opted in. This is a reason why the Tea Party fascists are so interested in Secretary of State offices. Even if it's, a so-called blue state, if nobody's watching, bang. And they opted in, 29 states. So then Kobach had their entire 29 states worth of database of voters and put his little program to work to red flag anybody voting twice. And the way you find people voting twice, of course, is anybody who has the same last name. And the claim when Palace started bugging about, oh, no, we use the first name, we use social security number, middle name. Then he gets the inner data, and no, they were just flagging by last names. Last names like Washington, because apparently around 3/4 of Americans whose last name is Washington are African American. Of course, if your name is Jose Martinez, all 5,000 of you didn't get to vote, and 4,995 of you don't know it. And so they keep hand-wringing over the failure of the Democrats this time. And granted, running a coelacanth, if you know what that is, like Biden at the top of the ticket and whatnot, and allowing, oh, socialism, and stuff. No, don't believe the hype that's coming from the corporate Democrats already about that. We got to be more right-wing. We got to be more corporate. We got to end this talk of Green New Deals and Medicare for all. And that's still a major part of the Democratic Party, and they control a lot of the upper machinery and make sure they do. But another reason is, in 2010, after the Citizens United ruling, all these people with right-wing, with access to all this right-wing money, be it Karl Rove and his PAC and Koch brothers and theirs and many more, were all ready to go and pounce after Citizens United in 2010, not just targeting senators, congressmen, governors, but state legislatures as well, especially state legislatures, because if you can tip whole houses of the legislature and put a crackpot in the governor's mansion, you can just run amok. And it's after the 2010 election that they got to redraw all the redistricts for the House of Representatives and the state houses.
That's
and
right.
Those
That's right.
wildly gerrymandered districts, like in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, they are so wildly gerrymandered that even when 2/3 of the people vote for Democrats in Wisconsin, the legislatures are 2/3 Republican. And they're going to stay that way partly because of this and partly because of, low D Democrats and the top of the ticket talking all about be me for president instead of emphasizing we need a better Senate. We need a better Congress. We need better state legislatures. Vote smart all the way down the ballot. Please, that matters more than anything. They never say that. But, those coronation conventions for president, their acceptance speeches, always just me. Imagine how much less damage we would have had if Bill Clinton had run against Newt Gingrich and Trent Lott, the segregationist from Mississippi who ran the Senate at that point in 96, instead of running against Bob Dole, who was going to lose anyway. Maybe partly because he needed the Newtsies to get, the corrupt stuff he got through. He already had NAFTA through, and I think GATT, but Telecommunications Act that allowed these corporate behemoths to swallow all these media outlets, and just in time for Fox News, and gutting the Glass-Steagall Act so banks could once again play Las Vegas with our money. And sure enough, they lost it all, just like the last time. And another economic crash happened. Most of his own party wasn't backing him on that. He needed the Newtsies. So who knows? But Obama did it too.
What's remarkable to me about all this, Jello, is you 4 years ago you did a video on what would Jello do, and it's right when Trump was first elected, and you were enraged.
Hang on, hold the thought.
Yep.
Another thing we have to do right now is not just let corporate powers that be put words in our mouths, because then we start thinking like that too. Anti-abortion zealots are not pro-life. They aren't pro-life of kids once they're born. They're anti-choice. Vote fraud means Republicans and gerrymandering, not some little Mexican mother voting twice in Dallas, Texas, and getting a 10-year prison sentence or something. No, the real vote fraud is there. And then for everybody, from the Rachel Maddows on down, when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, we all know he was not elected. Even if you don't believe me, on cross-check, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. That's what an election is, winning the popular vote. The Electoral College is not democratic. And as I say, forget Putin and the other interference that's been documented and traced back to Israel and Saudi Arabia. Cross-check was the main thing that tipped 2016, just in time to also tip down ballot. And lunatics like Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, there was one that got in North Carolina, and I believe Pennsylvania, those same so-called swing states, they were widely expected to lose because they were such a bunch of clowns. And these were so-called swing states. Instead, they all coasted back in just in time to keep, Uncle Mitch as the majority leader and put Gorsuch and the rapist and now the fanatic on the Supreme Court. The real vote fraud and ballot banditry has consequences. And so that's a lot of why there was a disappointing showing. I mean, granted, when you have somebody at the top of the ticket who excites as few people as the Bidenoid does, and the more you dig into his track record, the less enthusiastic you become. But other main reason was, this was not a pro-Biden vote, which, if it was, it would have brought a lot more people out.
Yeah,
it was an anti-Trump vote.
Exactly. My question to you is, to me, it's very clear that you have a two-party system in which neither party represents anybody but themselves. And
in other words, a one-party system.
Exactly. I mean,
masquerading as a two-party system. Call them the corporate party. Call them the incumbent party, like Jerry Brown used to do. Either way, that's really what this is. And, every once in a while, they'll give you a Bill Clinton saying he's the man from hope, or a Barack Star who says hope, change, and whatnot, and then cuts ties with all this new base as soon as he gets in. And then now with Biden, they realize from time to time we're going to have to let people let off some steam or the pot's going to boil over. We cannot let McCain be president now that we've crashed the economy, or there's going to be riots like we didn't even see during the Great Depression. Give him Obama. Let him feel good for a while. Well, meanwhile, behind the scenes, one flavor of Reagan after another.
And it does feel very much like there are a lot of people that are very much convinced that we haven't changed a lick, and that what we've gotten, what created a Donald Trump, is part of the problem to begin with. And maybe he's media creation, maybe he was for some people.
They already had the election rigged with cross-check for whoever the Republican nominees for the different offices were going to be. They didn't rig it specifically for Trump. But as soon as he announced and said all the horrible shit he said at his announcements about Mexicans are rapists and this kind of thing, and then rocketed overnight to leading the Republican pre-primary polls, they thought, wow, we don't have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars trying to get people to like some obvious asshole they've never heard of. No, this guy already has fans. He has a cult following even. You put this guy in, we can loot the store even more than we ever thought possible.
So what do you think is going to happen with all this? I mean, do you think that Trump is going to go out quietly? Do you think that there's going to be rampant change because he's now out of office, or do you think it's going to be status quo the way it normally is?
If he was going to be on hand to pass the torch to Biden at the inauguration, I wouldn't put it past him to become a suicide bomber. Maybe they would keep him away from toys he shouldn't have, but you could just gorge yourself on 2 or 3 times as many cheeseburgers as he normally consumes when he's up all night, firing off psycho tweets and stuff. You put enough of those in him, and he explodes like that dude did in the Monty Python movie, maybe that's how he wants to go out. I have no idea.
Like Mr. Creosote.
Lindsey Graham is already proposing that he just, step aside and then run again in 2024, when he will be as old as Biden is now, only in way worse physical and mental shape. So with that in mind, they're floating around, continuing the rallies. First as the election stolen, stop the steal the election. And after that, just keep them going. He's a terrible substance addict.
Right.
Only in this case, he's addicted to himself. That's what a narcissist is.
There's still 70 million people that voted for Donald Trump.
Well, I know. I mean, that's what, a fourth or a fifth of living, breathing Americans.
Yeah.
So if 1 in 4 people actually liked that guy so much they made the effort to vote for him, or even if they were holding their nose because they liked his administration's policies, which is arguably even worse. Just ask any child who's been sitting in a cage in Texas wondering where their mommy is and stuff. 1 in 4 voted like that. Even in San Francisco, it's kind of scary to be out and about or even walking around on the streets, see people going by. 1 in 4. Which one was it?
There's a part of me that really believes that the third parties were a little bit stronger, that they seem more like a plausible option to uproot some of this stuff, and it just hasn't happened yet. There hasn't been a third party candidate where you can say this is someone that could actually compete against the money and the interest and the corporate greed of all this. And it seems like we're stuck with this system.
What would most benefit, ironically, would be the Democrats. If they really want to run AOC and Bernie out of the party and they run enough people out, maybe there can finally be a viable independent. We had our hopes for the Green Party after the 2000 campaign with Ralph Nader, but it didn't quite get off the ground. And, in fighting more radicals and thou bickering going on as well. But, what we've never really had in this country is a proper American Labor Party.
It's true.
Don't even call yourselves the Green Party, and hint that, it's granola. Here come the granola munchers again. No. Reach out that hand. The Workers' Party, Labor Party. We stand for the rights and well-being of labor and workers. Because, of course, many of those, as Michael Moore pointed out, 30 years ago or more, that a lot of the people who are hardcore into Rush Limbaugh or Donald Trumpsy or Fox News, take your pick, they're on the same side we are and they don't know it. They are people who are frightened of losing their jobs, losing their homes, worried about how they're going to feed their families, one paycheck from, the roof falling in and stuff like that, which is why so many gazillions of dollars that could be used to help them is instead spent by our lovely 1%, if you want to use that term again, to make sure that they are instead, all that anger and energy is herded instead into holding pens where they all follow Rush Limbaugh. They think Trump is great. They actually believe what they see on Fox News.
Yeah.
That's the way to control what would otherwise be a mass uprising that could finally bring those people to heel, even if all it meant was them having to pay the proper amount of taxes. Yes, I am exhaling and feeling relieved yet depressed. I did go to bed and just that same numb shock Tuesday night. Oh my God, this 4-year nightmare is going to go on and it's going to get worse. But then right before I went to bed, I heard a little bit about Trump's speech and just the stuff he was talking about. Instead of hooray for me, I won, it's like, we're going to sue here, we're going to sue here, election rigged. I thought, oh my God, the dude's panicking. if he's panicking, maybe there's something I don't know. Maybe there really are 700,000 votes for Biden in Pennsylvania that still haven't been counted and stuff. So, and some of the others were remarkably glib the next day. Oh, yeah, no, once these are counted, you're going to see Trump lose, which he still may not when the litigation is done. I mean, the stuff with Giuliani actually writing the briefs and filing the lawsuits, those aren't the ones they're really digging in on with the intention of winning. I'm sure William Barr is hard at work on those. But, when you complain about how things were going with the Russian investigation, I need a new TV lawyer. That's what Giuliani is. He's the TV lawyer. The ones you want to watch out for are the ones whose names you don't know who are working for William Barr.
Yeah, well, I would assume that the lawsuits that have been out there and have been either swatted down by judges, they didn't seem like real plausible type of lawsuits to begin with. They seemed frivolous. But I agree with you. I think something bigger and more looming is right around the corner.
And not all of them were swatted down either.
Right.
I mean, initially, before the whole court will hear a case, if you're going straight to the Supreme Court, you just wind up with whatever so-called justice has that group of states as their district, and which means Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, all roads go through Samuel Alito, who is now being labeled the most right-wing person on the entire court, although given everybody from Clarence Thomas to Kavanaugh and Amy, I can't bear it. I don't know about that, but Alito, he did rule that all ballots that arrived after a certain time where Trump doesn't want them counted anymore have to be kept separate. I can kind of see that, but it was also calculated to be cut off when Trump was still ahead in Pennsylvania.
I will say that what you see in these elections, you have people so divided and so angry, and it doesn't even matter how it winds up. You're always going to have someone who is alienated by this process. If there's any good thing that happened, is that you still had, 140, 150 million people vote. That's something that doesn't happen very often when you have that many people who are motivated to cast their vote in the first place. But
which is still a disgracefully low percentage
absolutely
of eligible voters compared to most other countries we think of as our peers.
Absolutely. But considering the kind of apathy that this country normally has about who it elects and, who's in charge, that is somewhat slightly encouraging, but disturbing all at the same time when you consider that some people are willing to look the other way just because they don't like the other guy.
Well, sometimes that's what it comes to. I was under a lot of pressure from people I knew to hold my nose and vote for Biden. And I said, no, I cannot do it. My conscience won't let me, in no small part because I have the luxury of living in a state that's all in for whoever the Democratic nominee is going to be. And I don't have to worry. I can vote my conscience. I'd rather vote for something I want and not get it than vote for something I don't want and get it. And I also pay very close attention to the lower part of the ballot, the people on the Board of Supervisors. We're going to run San Francisco, and, what kind of a DA we're going to have. We've got a good one right now that the police unions nationwide are trying to get ousted and stuff.
So I do want to ask you, because obviously, you do have a new album out too, and the timing on this couldn't be better. I know it's been a couple of years since the last Guantanamo School of Medicine album came out, but the Satan's Comb Over song couldn't have been released at a better time.
Sadly, the album, which is called Tea Party Revenge Porn, it's only online right now, which is how possibly even a majority, even of my listeners, actually buy stuff nowadays. But, I, the vinyl junkie who would much rather have something to hold in my hand, has to wait till after Christmas. Things just weren't getting done in a timely manner. And then there's the manufacturing turnaround time, which has gotten longer and longer as more and more places want to make vinyl again, but the pressing plants can't keep up,
Right.
even though there's all kinds of people starting pressing plants now. Where they're getting the machines, I don't know. And not all of them know what the hell they're doing. So, although there's really good ones, too. But, and we want a good one, so we're going to get them in next year. The CDs may show up this year. I'm not sure yet.
Well,
but,
I've heard the whole the whole thing on Spotify, and I thought it was great. I mean, it's just it's vintage Biafra, the way I see it.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that none of my albums, my music albums, have ever sounded alike. No two Dead Kennedys albums sound alike. No two Lard albums even sound alike.
That's true.
And then I always freak out and get all insecure that this new one's going to be weak and, oh, well, this is what we got and stuff. And then by the time it gets done, I'm like, God, this is a pretty damn good record. Cool. I'm so glad I persevered and got it out there and kept mixing and remixing till it got as full on and rip your head off as I like things to sound.
Well, the one thing that does run through everything that you ever recorded is the kind of critical thinking skills that you have, which are beyond any scale I've ever seen. I don't know how you develop those skills, but they're remarkably refined.
Well, everybody from Frank Zappa to Sparks, the vintage Sparks stuff, the lyrics are incredible on there and kind of in the same wordy, satirical style that I use. I mean, if I had a better way with words, my spoken word shows would be about a quarter as long as they had become. Or, I'm not Hank Williams. I'm not Ian MacKaye. I express myself in a different way. But if I'm going to use it this way, then I'm going to be all into the gruesome details and apply that method acting training I had growing up, to be able to, paint pictures so people are kind of in a you are there scenario.
Right.
Instead of the same old, I love you, baby, buy my record, sex, drugs, rock and roll, emo, wah! And I've never related to that stuff. I mean, occasionally there's an actual love song that really does touch me. And it's harder in punk and stuff, especially hardcore. I mean, one of the few I can think of is Trust, that ends either the first or the second album by 7 seconds back in the mid-'80s. Right. I mean, I tip my hat to him on that one. That's a great song. But I just kind of write what comes out of me, and I do like to paint pictures and provide gruesome details. People say, oh, why don't you do more personal stuff? Well, you've heard reason number one. I'm so bored with other people's personal stuff for the most part. And number two, the stuff I do sing about, it's my way of singing the blues.
That is true.
Even if you're singing the blues, you don't always have to sing about yourself. Hank Williams didn't always sing about himself either.
It's it's funny because I remember back in the '80s and seeing you appear in Phil Donahue shows and stuff like that, and people say, "Look how shocking this is," and it's like the people that knew your music didn't look at it as anything shocking at all. If anything, it's satirical. It's about like a social consciousness that a lot of lyricists can't figure out how to do. And so to me,
it's easy to do it. It's harder to be clever with it.
Exactly, and that's why when you bring up like Sparks and the lyrics of Ron Mayle, he's maybe one of the best lyricists there's ever been. But he's unfortunate.
Russell wrote a lot of them too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Indiscreet, which is indeed my favorite Sparks album, that one is mostly Ron.
Yeah.
But a lot of the others, the songs are credited to both of them across the board.
I interviewed Russell, and it was just to get these guys to talk about themselves was really hard to do, but really interesting to talk to those guys.
Yeah, I met them briefly once, and they were very nice and stuff, but we didn't really, get to know each other or anything, unfortunately. I just they had a show to do. I had a show to do. It was a Coachella festival, and we were all in a little trailer park of dressing rooms and stuff. So I'm glad I got to tell them how important they were to me, though, for sure.
You mentioned your vinyl collection. I've seen a video of it, seen pictures of it. I don't know if it's something that I would want. There's part of me that's jealous, and there's a part of me that thinks, "Oh my God, he's living in the TV show Hoarders."
I'm in the biggest room in the house now, the living room. It has my little so-called office desk up on a landing. It's a cathedral roof like some of the cool Colorado houses and stuff. Not one record in this room.
Well, you got to be able to spread out
DVDs before you have to run the gauntlet to get into the so-called dining room, where the dining room table, yes, is covered with records, as are all the chairs, and it's the DVDs in the meantime. But yeah, I told one now ex-girlfriend who was kind of weirding out about, someday this whole house is going to be one big cube of records, and I'll crash on a cot in the corner. And she later told me that it was clear later when she was bumming out of it that she believed me.
Well, if it's a matter of the records or her, the records win every time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not casting aspersions on her, but I'd have to tell her, look, records have been a lot more honest to me over the years than people.
You also got some gems in there, and it's funny. I was watching, I think it was called Crate Diggers, and there was a couple records you had or you showed that I'm like, I have that one. I think you showed a Mrs. Miller record. I got the same exact one, and then you pulled out the Hino record.
You've got the Mrs. Miller pot record?
No,
the one where she's holding green hash brownies on the cover.
I've got the one where she does Petula Clark's Downtown.
Oh yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah, and these
I
boots
saw
are made for
her do
walking.
that on TV in second grade.
I don't even know how I got it. All I know is that somehow it fell into my lap, and I'm sure you feel this. You must experience this too, where
she even beat John Denver to the punch by having her first album called Mrs. Miller's Greatest Hit.
Well, she's a bigger talent.
I think John Denver's greatest hits wasn't until album 3, and several of the hits are only on that one.
Right.
I mean, there actually even is a John Denver record in my house. You can imagine how much he tormented me growing up in Colorado. Transplanted Texas Republican though he was. But I had to have, Daddy, please don't get drunk this Christmas. I don't want to see my mama cry. Finding Daddy passed out under the tree. I would hope Denver was laughing as hard as we were when he wrote that song. It's part of the Rocky Mountain Christmas album, but imagine my excitement when I found that on a 45.
Yeah, that had to be a hell of a find.
Yeah, hooray! I don't have to let a John Denver album in my house ever.
You also had your big stack of Hino records too, and as goofy as that guy seemed, I didn't realize he sold like 50 million records in his career. He was a huge star in Germany.
What do you mean was a huge star?
He still is. He's still alive.
He is a huge star. One of his last releases was a full-on metal album, borrowing the sound of Rammstein and possibly the musicians too, but putting the lyrics from his hits in there instead. I haven't gotten my hands on that one. But you Google Hino now, you get to see all his pictures of him in studded leather, grinning like the cat that ate the canary, like he always does now, because here he is in his 80s, and he's laughing all the way to the bank yet again. I mean, last time I was in Europe, which was, a couple of years ago by now. One of our German crew guys who also runs an equipment rental place, and some stuff was getting rented by Hino because he just put out metal album and whatever else. And Oh, yeah, no, he's playing the show. It's a full soccer stadium show, and it's sold out 6 months in advance. He's still that huge and really controversial, too, both because he's such a craven cash register and because his main popularity base in his heyday, it wasn't all of Germany, it was Bavaria, which has been described to me by some people who live there as the Texas of Germany in terms of how right-wing the area is compared to others and whatnot. So my fascination with Heino does not always go over well with the punk community in some other parts of Germany. I mean, as I think you're aware, I mean, his music is German Schlager music, oompa oompa, with this baritone voice, but a multi-octave range and stuff. And he can sing both much lower and much higher than Brian Ferry. But with a booming Teutonic tone. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think I heard you describe it as if you wanted to clear out a room, you either put on Heino or Venom. It was one of the two.
Well, that was a particular druggy roommate girlfriend who moved into the house. Roommate's girlfriend, and that was the way to get rid of her for the day. And then I realized the power this thing actually had. Punks are supposed to shock and annoy people, right? Well, to me, that's part of what punk is, and a major part of what punk still is. To me, punk rock today is those TikTok kids who got together and fooled Donald Trump and his now fired campaign manager, Bradley Pascal, into thinking 1 million people were coming to his rally. And then he only drew about 6,000. And, oh, man, that was hilarious. And they're at it again, by the way, because he set up a hotline to report voter fraud. And apparently almost everybody who's calling it is calling it as a prank and stringing people out just long enough, making up their vote fraud story that it takes the Trumpsy on the other end a while to realize it's actually another fake call. The more, the merrier. But anyway, punk as prank. I mean, by the time Dead Kennedys was a headliner, could draw a few hundred to 1,000 or two at a show, and overseas especially, and then a bit in America too. Anyway. But, okay, they always play the Sex Pistols. They always play the Clash. They always play the Ramones before we go on. We should take control of that and fuck with people. It gets harder to if you've got your own fan base who is there to see you, although Nazi Punk Fuck Off sure got a reaction when we debuted that, and it's still a volatile piece of work. But Guantanamo School of Medicine performs it as Nazi Trump's Fuck Off, by the way. Nazi Trumps. And that implies to all his followers, too. Now that they have somebody to follow besides Ted Nugent and, what's the country guy? I can't think of his name offhand, but anyway. What's the guy's name? I'm going to get it wrong. I want to say Sturgeon Threadgill, and that is not his name. But and even if they might not be on the same page politically, you can't deny Junior Brown. And along with all the other things Hank Williams III, Hank III, does so well, if he's doing straight country, he's awful damn good at it. All the people say he's just faking that. Sorry. You can't do it that well, that effortlessly, unless you have a deep love and passion for the music.
Well,
the point where on Crate Diggers, he's showing off his record collection. And imagine how honored I was when he pulled out Plastic Surgery Disasters by Dead Kennedys as one of his favorites. And then also showed a one-of-a-kind acetate, one copy only record of a song by his grandfather that had never been released.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and it's cool that that it's his, too. I especially like that part. But, I just got a hold of, and I think somebody was kind of gloating about it, and it was, ridiculously expensive. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. This belongs in the vault, sir. It was a one-of-a-kind acetate. I think Geza X went into a mastering place and cut a version of Too Drunk to Fuck with all the fucks bleeped out in hopes that it could get played by Rodney Bingenheimer on KROQ, K-Rock or something. But anyway, back to Heino. I thought, okay, why give people what they're expecting? This is no different from all the people who wanted nothing but Elton John and Fleetwood Mac when I was DJing during the lunch hour at the high school cafeteria, and they didn't like Zappa or the Stooges. But, this is the same thing. Keep it safe. Generation X, keep it safe. No. Before Dead Kennedys goes on, you're going to get at least half an hour of Hino every single night. And that wound people up so effectively before we went on. I mean, the promoter, what's his name, Randy Ellis, of City Gardens and Trenton, he actually pulled the cassette out of the tape deck without pushing stop and threw it on the ground in front of me. He was so offended, and then put the Cockney Rejects on instead. And then we thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. What happens if we do this to Germany? And so we're playing Hamburg, first show with Slime, who are still a political force of a band in Germany, and MDC was the opener then. And so we put Hino on. Before we go on, here's all these dudes with the studded jackets and the mohawks. They suddenly broke out in traditional German folk dancing. The second Hino song came on, and they threw everything they could find at the balcony where the sound booth was. They were not pleased. And then in Berlin, Hino stopped only halfway through the first song, and I go back to our sound guy, what the hell happened? Why are you doing that? And he just kind of grinned and pointed down to the floor, and he was up past his ankles in beer cans.
And yet, here you are just promoting a national treasure.
But not everybody views him as a national treasure, because even his politics aside, there's all kinds of people and generations of them who were forced to listen to Hino by their parents and have never recovered.
That's too bad, because, like I said, he is a national wonder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jello,
and then the same guy goes, yeah, you should come to the show. I mean, get your picture taken with Hino. He knows who you are. And I'm like, oh my God, that is all the more reason not to. Because he's not known for his sense of humor. Thus the lawsuit against a guy who connected with that band, the Totenhosen, who were like if No Effects were a stadium-sized band over here, they're that big. Humor and pop punk band in the German language, an institution by now. And they had a guy who would come out with a wig and shades, and the Aryan blonde hair, and he kind of, some people say he looks like Andy Warhol, but anyway, dressed as Hino, and then they would mutilate Hino songs to the great amusement of the Totenhosen fans. Hino sued, claiming exclusive rights to the look and the shades because he had bought the company. And, you can't do that to me. And to prove that he didn't have exclusive rights to the look and even the shades, the Totenhosen, the real Hino, as the guy called himself, he had also run for office as a gadfly before, too. I've met him. But anyway, they packed the courtroom gallery during the trial as much as possible, where every single person in the room was dressed as Hino. And Hino won anyway, but was so humiliated by the whole thing in terms of bad public reaction, he scooted out a side door, and that was the last you heard about that with him.
Wow.
You can imagine how the Totenhosen felt when he made his first so-called metal album to mount yet another comeback. And yes, he was number one in the charts for weeks and weeks and weeks after that. Amazing. With a skull with a Hino wig and shades on it. He didn't just do a Rammstein song in the Hino style on that album. He did a Totenhosen song, too. And the Totenhosen publicly protested.
Wow. That's a great story.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
I've talked about Hino more than I've talked about the Tea Party Revenge album.
Well, you're right.
Album and whatnot.
You're right.
First thing is, you talk about how apropos it is, and that's why it came out online as early as it did, because I realized we weren't going to get the vinyl or the CDs back from the manufacturing plants, and this thing has to drop now, especially because
for the first time in my entire legacy of activity in this regard, the word career kind of makes me feel weird, so I won't use that. But anyway, first ever official Jello Biafra video clips. I never did. I never found the right Winston Smith type who could do them and stuff and make them really cool and not like all the stupid stuff from MTV on down. I mean, when I was a little kid seeing bands on TV, they were playing live, or at least I thought they were,
right,
or lip syncing live, which meant that was what I wanted to do, not dance around and do dippy, stupid stuff and piss away more money than you spent recording the entire album just to make a dumbass video of one song in hopes MTV would play it. Not into it. I wrote MTV Get Off the Air instead, and boy, do I stand by that. But anyway, then of all people, an Alternative Tentacles recording artist you may know of, Annie Kidd, started making these videos for a set of political songs she was making herself in response to the murder of George Floyd and other things like that. And they just got better and better. I was like, oh, my God, she has directed film before, too. Annie, how about making one of those for me? I thought you'd never ask. So then, God, it seemed like it was a 10-day or 2-week period. She went wild and made 5 of them. And the first one we posted was Taliban USA, where I go after the people who wrongly label themselves pro-life and compare them to the Salem witch hunters and the ISIS and everything else. And I stand by that, too. And goddamn Roberts and the Supreme Court as it stood then, they punted the ball on totally blowing up Roe v. Wade for another year in order not to tip the election to anybody except more Republicans. So they're going to do the next one, and now they got Barrett on there, too. So it came out right when that decision went down, and it would have gone viral, except that women got their reproductive rights for another year. So I guess I'll settle for that. That's a good exchange. I'm okay with that. And then, be Donna, read and breed, God's handmade plan for you, and whatnot. And so there was that one. There's one for Satan's Come Over. There's one for Tea Party Revenge Porn, the title track. Another one called We Created Putin, which is about the only real Trump-specific one on there, and only partly is. I like my songs to last longer than that, so you rarely get a song like Barack Star Obama out of me. I mean, having to rewrite California Uber Alice when Reagan got in, and I realized my pet conspiracy theory about Jerry Brown was totally wrong. I learned from that. Went gunning for Hillary's child porn ring, and all I got was a lousy pizza. I mean, people just hand these things to me. This is why I don't run out of ideas. With Americans finding new ways to be that stupid and that scary, I'm never going to run out of ideas. And that also applies to the music, because I listen to so much other music and not just restrict my listening to punk music.
Right.
I mean, back when we were starting these bands, there wasn't any old school. We were burning down the school. We were blowing up the school. We were building a wall around ourselves and sandbagging our lives in so we couldn't be attacked mercilessly over and over again by the Eagles and Saturday Night Fever and Elton John and the rest of it. We wanted, punk brought back rock and roll, the spirit of rock and roll, especially when the new wave was an umbrella term, and so was punk, so it was all interchangeable before major labels decided by early 78, no more punk bands. We don't want another 60s. But if you want to be new wave, then you're okay. Put on a skinny pink necktie and dance happily around and make sure you have a catchy song about the radio. And then maybe you'll get on the radio. What effect that also had was that, unlike Britain and even other parts of Europe, where punk got so big so fast, the majors were signing people like Sham 69 and UK Subs, and of course Pistols and 999, Generation X, and the rest. And they were having commercial chart hits, and that meant you got to be on top of the pops and whatnot, and it was a whole different scene, which also trickled down to all kinds of people forming their own bands and their own labels, some of which got to be as big as Factory or 4AD or some of them. And, you know, that was a very different thing. But in America, once the major labels, you know, the rope got cut, and the last one who got signed was the Dickies, who were rumored to have an uncle at A&M Records who got them the deal. No more until Warner Brothers caved in and signed Husker Du, well over half a decade later. But what the effect that had was the people who kept on with punk were the people who really, really loved the music and loved the scene. And, okay, we don't even have to care whether Sire Records is going to want us or not. We know they won't. Fuck them. We'll just do what we want to do. And the music quickly got fiercer than what was going on in England for the most part.
Right.
Except for Discharge and then, you know, some of the Crass label bands a little bit earlier. What it meant was, you know, it got so extreme, hardcore was born. I mean, the generic stuff I get bored with, but every once in a while I hear something, oh my God, this is the shit. They know exactly what deadly chord to hit at the right time, and it's really full-on energy-wise, which often means that the people involved can really play well, too. The fiercest stuff, where the people are the deepest into it, most of it is in non-English speaking countries. You know, Spain, Latin America, you know, European continent. That's where, you know, a lot of stuff that's really the shit is still going on.
Well, Jello, listen, I appreciate the time tonight. Thank you very, very much for joining me, and best of luck with the record with the Guantanamo School of Medicine.
Well, thanks a lot, and good luck. And I don't know where the link went. Sent the link to the Russell interview again.
Okay, we'll do.
Okay, you can answer this.
Yeah.
Do they pronounce their last name Male or Mall?
Male.
Okay, because I've heard both.
I have two.
All right.
I have two, but according to Russell, it's male.
All right.
So
that is more masculine. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, Jello. Bye-bye. The new album by Jello, Biafra, and the Guantanamo School of Medicine is called Tea Party Revenge Porn. It's available to download wherever you download music. Let me know what you think of the podcast at backs@rock102.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thanks for listening to Baxi's Musical Podcast.